Outcome Memories version 0.2 is finally here. Finally. And as usual, I'm here to give you the rundown on the update, analyzing and criticizing where appropriate. I don't think I need to give you that much more of a lengthy introduction, you know what you're here for. This video is going to try and move really fast as there's a lot to cover, and I'm tired of making 30 to 40 minute long videos right now. Okay, let's go. Like, subscribe, whatever. The main draw of this update was the 2 new killers, the 3 new maps, and a few system changes. Let's start with the shop. I'm not a fan of it. While stylish, I will always prioritize function over form. There's even more menus to navigate now, and there's still lengthy camera transitions, all the while the run button still just doesn't say back or something clear. The UI in the lobby also isn't all that clear. Going into each character in the shop and reading about their kit is also very hit or miss. The text is really small, and again, it's prioritizing style over function. The descriptions themselves are also pretty confusing, and I don't think anyone proofread them at all. The launch for this game's update was also quite buggy, and I've seen an overall stark decrease in the game's performance after this update. The bugs can be ironed out, but performance is likely a trickier issue that I hope they can figure out how to stabilize more in the future. I understand that it can just be like that when you update a Roblox game, but some of those bugs were pretty ridiculous to the point it made the first few hours of the update pretty funny. Okay, now for the moment you've all been waiting for, let's start with these new characters, starting with Survivor. Silver, as expected, is a very strong character. He's the king of displacements and has some of the most mobility of any survivor in the game. His suspension is a very long stun setup or displace, and his rocks are an incredibly strong dizzying debuff that prevents attacks and slows executioners. And his time warp thing is also a very strong ability. It also kind of sounds like a lobotomy video. And of course, Flight. Flight is really strong, and overall, Silver is probably one of the strongest survivors in the game because of it. Flight basically ties his entire kit together, and if it weren't for Flight, I think he would probably be pretty bad. However, there are a few things I don't like about him, which is the current way his flight operates. It's unintuitive. Instead of tying the ability to spacebar, it should just be tied to a dedicated button like every other ability and just have it be a press and hold button. By having it on spacebar, it makes triggering it, jumping, exiting it, and all that stuff a hassle to do. Silver should just fly if you hold an ability button, and he should stay flying for as long as the button is held, and whether he's on the ground or not. It's really that simple. Flight should also drain a little bit more when he's staying still in the air. It drains a bit too slowly when staying still in my opinion, allowing Silver to really just stall and be annoying. Suspension basically has a non-existent cooldown on miss, and only has one if hit. I kinda like this, especially considering how the move absolutely sucks to aim. This game is a third-person shoulder perspective, and with the way the crosshair works, also with how bulky Silver's design is, it makes aiming pretty hard as him. The same can be said about rocks. Actually aiming these things is simultaneously difficult, but also just really jank. I've had several times when trying to create rocks I just lose the cooldown and don't do anything, and other times where I'm able to frame one an executioner with a pebble. Actually using this ability for its intended purpose feels pretty inconsistent and jank, just like really all of his kit. I think he's a character that will age quite well once people know how to really exploit him, as his movement is easily the best in the game, and his support capabilities are also pretty good. Next is Blaze. She's good, but not as good as I was expecting her to be. That's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. Her javelin is pretty strong, her ground kicks come out fast, and her air kicks are strong, and Soul Flame was also a predictably strong, obnoxious move. However, the strongest element of her kit is her javelin, absolutely. It's kind of funny considering that she loses access to it the better she does, and can't actually use her abilities whenever she wants. Soul Flame is neat and powerful, but it has far less versatility than her javelin. Javelin keeps her safer, can be used at a much greater range, and also creates a huge burst of distance on command. If Blaze could actually choose when to spend her meters, she'd be a lot better. As it stands, I think she's really held back by being unable to choose when she uses certain parts of her kit. Between the two, I think Silver is generally the stronger survivor, as he fills some niches that this game just doesn't have yet in terms of survivor role. However, he's also just too janky and unpolished to really feel like he can be played to his fullest potential yet. Blaze feels a lot more polished and finished, but there's some barriers to her versatility that prevent her from being an exceptional survivor. Now for killers, this is the real meat and potatoes. Let me just clarify that you really could not pay me to play 2011X again. I really don't care about how good or bad his buffs are, especially now that I have to commit so much more time to getting an executioner match. As it stands, he's still a character incentivized to play in a really boring way that is kind of like a jerk, and he's really got one of my least favorite mechanics I've ever seen in an ASIM. Seriously, I can't stress how pleasant this game is now without having to worry about rage mode. He's also the reason this game needs changelogs publicly, because as far as I'm aware, version 0.2 did not have a changelog posted anywhere. You should never not have a changelog for people to read. I'd love to talk about his changes, but doing so at this soon is just kind of a pain to do because there's no changelog, and I really don't feel like putting several hours into learning him and seeing what changed, if anything, at this point. Making him good or playable doesn't really matter to me because I'm just sick of this guy and his gameplay design. His moveset is just horribly unhealthy for the game. Just know I don't hate 2011X as a character, just his moveset. And now before going on to the new killers, I do want to clarify something. Outcome Memories version 0.1 had 2011X, and all the version 0.1 survivors are basically designed around him. 2011X is a weird character of massive extremes, and largely, I think a lot of the survivor players are used to being able to easily deal with many of the players of him at this point. That's why both these new killers are probably pretty shocking to a lot of people, because both of them are far more dangerous than version 0.1 2011X. It's fair to criticize their designs or balance, just know that going against these two is going to be a learning process. It's okay to vent your frustrations with them, but try not to let yourself get blinded by them. Figure out counterplays and see how effective those things are, if anything. Stuff like that. And besides, in my last video, I did warn people of this happening. Let's start with Tripwire because she's more interesting and probably my least favorite new character from a gameplay perspective. I don't have fun playing as her, and playing against her is just kinda miserable. Her main gimmick is meant to be area denial. She can attack really fast but deals lower damage compared to other killers, but that's not saying she's weak in close quarters. She's actually still pretty strong. They replaced her flight with a double jump and glide. The double jump seems to actually be based on your camera direction. This is fine and all, but it also makes playing her without a mouse probably pretty annoying, and a lot of the times you want to be looking downwards as a killer. In this game, she's listed as a zoner. As a fighting game player, there's a lot of different types of zoners. Tripwire is a NetherRealm Studios zoner. That is not a compliment. For actual abilities, she has trip mines. These things basically come off cooldown instantly, and they have a cap of 10. These things suck to play against. You can disarm them, but that requires using an entire cooldown on specific characters. Using a cooldown, a survivor's only real lifeline, to destroy one mine that essentially has no cooldown is most certainly a design choice. Not to mention, something like Blaze's Javelin can't be used willingly by her to disarm a trap if she has meter. She'd have to burn one of her enhanced moves and then use Javelin to disarm it. There's nothing stopping her from just constantly placing down trip mines around everywhere. There's nothing stopping her from just placing mines down next to a downed survivor, nor is there anything stopping her from placing them down on springs or preemptively around where escape rings form. As usual, the trapping monster opens up extremely lame ways to play the game that aren't particularly fun or interesting for survivors to engage with, and I'd say aren't very interesting or fun for the killer either. Next is her reach out move. I just don't understand how this move is meant to work, and actually reading in-game descriptions for it basically doesn't help at all. It grabs everyone around her, deals tick damage, and slowly pulls them closer. It seems like a really weird ability for her to have, if I'm being honest. More importantly, this ability is pretty easy to land when you want to land it, and gives Tripwire stun immunity for the duration. If you try and stun Tripwire out of this move, you take damage and don't actually stop it. This move can hit up to 4 people. I get maybe giving her a shield because the people caught in it can't stun her that way, but why not just lock their abilities if they're hit by it for a short period of time? Because as it stands, this ability is just guaranteed damage for being used. 2011X doesn't have a shield on his lockdown grab move, and he shouldn't either, so I don't know why Tripwire does when she can grab multiple people. Speaking of guaranteed damage for her simply existing, Tripwire's actually most obnoxious move is her laser. This thing absolutely sucks to play against. It's not fun at all. First, it tanks the performance of the game. It massacres performance. Second, it's an ability that deals an absurd amount of damage for Tripwire even having line of sight on you. A solid 25 damage, and then deals tick damage over time for focus. As a survivor, your only form of counterplay to this move is to break line of sight, even though Tripwire can still run faster than every survivor, and can also move while the laser is active at the regular speeds. The other form of counterplay is to simply hope the Tripwire is bad and can't aim. Realistically, you're taking 25 damage at minimum, if not even more, every time this ability is used near you. Tripwire, in her current state, is a very unfun addition to the game, in my opinion. Her trip mines incentivize really boring play due to where she can place them, how many she can place, and how often she can do so. Outcome Memories is a very fast-paced, mobility-centric game, and having a trapper character is really just a hard sell, and playing against her only reaffirms my doubts. I simply don't like trapping characters in most of these games for this reason, across my 1,000 hours of several different asymmetric games. Outside her traps, Tripwire has extremely consistent and easy abilities that guarantee damage, especially with her laser. Laser all but guarantees damage as long as there's line of sight, and Reach Out also is just guaranteed damage on a shockingly easy to use move. I don't know if I'd say she's too strong or too weak. I don't really particularly care to argue that this early in version 0.2's lifespan. What I can say is that I just don't think she's very fun to engage with in her current state. She's an extremely boring killer to play as and against, at least in my opinion. The last thing is that she can also be really hard to distinguish from the environment or other survivors at times, and I don't know why the gem doesn't glow like a lamp around her to at least keep her illuminated and let survivors easily identify her. Oh yeah, and she also has an indicator passive. I get why she has this, especially because of the new maps in this game. Colossus. I actually really like Colossus. He's definitely fun to play as, and it's probably the only time I've ever really had fun playing Executioner in this game outside of the very early days of version 0.1. However, Colossus is nowhere near perfect, and I think he really only rips open a lot of the problems already present in much of this game's design. First and foremost, we need to just talk about his damage output. Colossus is a character that deals an absurd amount of damage, capable of two-shotting survivors with his basic attack, and he has setups to do anywhere from 90 damage to outright downing a survivor. Specifically, he's a character that's meant to punish survivors for getting close to him in the first place. In a game where killers are naturally faster than survivors, have infinite stamina, and getting close is inevitable. While he's fun to play, he can absolutely be suffocating to play against when you are extensively focused, and in some cases based on ragdoll RNG, you could just outright die to him off of one interaction. His M1 damage is listed as 55, but he actually does 50. Either way, he's capable of two-shotting survivors at both 100 HP and 60 HP. He's pretty insane. He has his charge, which is debatably one of the strongest moves in the game. Colossus just turns into an unstoppable freight train capable of repositioning and isolating survivors, and is one of his best combo tools when RNG is in his favor. There's not much any survivor can meaningfully do to avoid this move unless you have a counter or some kind of strong on-command mobility option, but that's also kind of the fun aspect of it too to me. I really love using this ability as Colossus, and I think it adds some spice to playing against him as a survivor. Next is his grab. It's okay. Probably the most okay part of his kit. When it works, it's fine, but it's another move that kinda just feels awkward and inconsistent to use at times. His indicator is one of the most comfortable abilities in the game and makes hiding against Colossus basically useless, and honestly, he does kind of need it with the way the maps are designed, but we'll get there when we get there. His block is also a thing that exists. I feel like it's pretty difficult to make use of this move, especially when it's on the Z key of all buttons, and as far as I'm aware, there's no way to rebind this. If it was on something like the R key, that would be much more natural. Anyways, it's a pretty alright ability outside of that. Now here's what I will say, it makes no sense that Colossus has this block ability to shut down stuns, but then also gets a speed boost after being stunned even if it is super brief. I just don't get the design philosophy at all. He's able to get around pretty well with charge, and charge is on a pretty short cooldown all things considered. He has an indicator, so he always knows where he needs to be going. Colossus has the most direct tool in the game for dealing with stuns through block. So why on earth does he need help for when he does get stunned? It's a design that doesn't make sense to me. If he blocks, fails, and then gets stunned for it, he shouldn't be getting a reward for that anyways. He should be having to hold that stun in all of its power. I guess you could say the intention is for him to be so heavily anti-stun, but I don't like that design. I'd rather him only have one or the other, and block is significantly more interesting and engaging for both sides. Really, Colossus isn't super interesting to talk about because of how simple his design is. He charges and carries, he grabs, he counters, he locates, he combos stuff together. When he does do damage, he does a lot. Honestly, I think it's definitely just fine, it's just very unpredictable in how much he'll do based on ragdoll RNG and stuff. If he cannot get close to you, he's pretty bad actually. If he can, he's one of the best in his niche. Maybe a little too good at times, but he definitely is a strong executioner that I can't see getting bullied nearly as easily as old 2011X. I really wouldn't know where to balance him without another week or so of people playing him and figuring him out. He's absolutely capable of being contested, survivors just have to work very hard and perform generally better than Colossus can perform individually. To me, right now, he's the most fun executioner to play against, even if he is super high damage. He also seems pretty map sensitive, with most of the newer maps not being great for him. His wall climb isn't really all that reliable on them, and we'll get to the new maps in just a second, trust me. There is one last thing I'll say, which is that I do think survivors are pretty under-equipped to deal with these two new executioners. Something I was worried about in my last video on outcome memories. Balancing is more than just tweaking some values or making a move deal slightly more damage. Balancing is also character options and design. Knuckles really only has options in close quarters and two stunning abilities. When you counter Colossus, he gets a speed boost and chases after you. If you punch Colossus, you run the risk of getting blocked. Even if you bypass his block, you still give him a speed boost. You try to approach Tripwire as Knuckles, and she has her grapple that can punish you, and her laser can make getting close painful in the first place, as well as really just existing anywhere in her sightline. It's things like that. Every survivor has something like this right now with the new killers, and that just makes them feel pretty under-equipped. The survivors can keep up, but likely not as comfortable as they probably should, at least for public lobbies. The maps, in my opinion, are probably the most frustrating additions in this new update next to Tripwire. I can't say I particularly like a lot of these new maps. They all suffer from the same things, but also have unique traits that I personally don't really like about them. Some of them bother me more than the actual character balancing of this game. There's 3 new maps in this update, with one replacing a former map, starting with purely new ones. First is Angel Island. I really do not like playing on this map. Like every map we'll talk about, it's deceptively gigantic. Everything is on fire, making the only colors you'll ever really see being red, yellow, and mostly orange. Despite how bright this map is, it's also shockingly dark, and it's really hard to see on due to a combination of this darkness and heavy color and blur filters. I also can't say I really enjoy any of the playable spaces. There's foliage everywhere where there isn't fire, and there's a ton of awkward collision angles, invisible walls, and just random junk scattered about. There's no need for all these torches to be around, as well as just much of the other junk and litter. It really just gets in the way of a smoother gameplay experience. I especially don't like these areas tucked away indoors in the temples. Playing in those areas has always been really uncomfortable due to the collision and awkward designs of everything. It's so hard to see anything on this map from the combination of colors and the blurring effects, and I just really don't like playing on it all that much. I definitely think it needs quite a bit of changes to make it a lot more playable. Mystic Cave has similar issues. The collisions are pretty bad in many of the different areas of it, and it's absolutely littered with invisible walls and really lacking any sort of clarity regarding them. The invisible walls on Mystic Cave are worse than any other map though. I really don't even know why some of these walls are even here in the first place. Because it's a cave, a lot of the surfaces are also just slanted or awkward. Colossus struggles on this map due to so much of it being elevated and narrow, all the walkways having roofs on them that survivors can easily get onto, and a long walk back if you fall. I wouldn't be surprised if both of these maps were designed in the way they are, with so many choke points, narrow walkways, and invisible walls, to keep Tripwire's mines threatening. While it definitely does work to do this, it also just massively kills any enjoyment you could have playing on these maps, and makes Tripwire feel even more oppressive, which she really doesn't need currently. Mystic Cave is at least visible, unlike much of Angel Island. However, it is unfortunately pretty dull and doesn't really feel like a Sonic environment to me. Mystic Cave Zone has a ton of green and purple, whereas this is just completely dull and almost lacking any form of color outside of gray and brown. I do also kinda wish they would have done more with the water, but I don't know about that. I understand wanting to approach the map from a unique angle from the source material, but it's unfortunately not doing much else from the other maps in this game visually because of it. I'm just not a really big fan of this map, and I really don't like playing against Tripwire on it. I just don't have much fun on this map in general. Finally, we have Green Hill's remake. Of all the maps to remake, I don't know why they remade Green Hill first. First and foremost, just like both Mystic Cave and Angel Island, this map is absurdly gigantic. The old Green Hill was fairly small, but I felt as if it helped structure the game more towards teamwork and teamfights. Making yet another map just be this gigantic, invisible wall-riddled map feels like a waste. And yeah, there's invisible walls everywhere here. I don't know what the point of making an open, playable giant map is if you're going to be forced to essentially go down hallways anyways. Some characters in this game can fly, and you're not letting them use their abilities to their fullest, which is at their most fun as well. You have characters like Sonic and Colossus that are super fast, yet much of the map is based around sharp turns, invisible walls, slopes you can't see well when you go up them, and all these other things that contrast the idea of going fast. While it does look a lot like Green Hill in visual design, it would feel a lot more like Green Hill if it weren't for these things. If the map was a lot more suitable for the high-speed characters, I think it'd be a lot better. And again, I've said it before, but this map just has about everything I've complained about before. Random invisible jagged edges, tons of slopes and awkward angles everywhere, tons of invisible walls and edges to get caught on or outright denied by. This map does have a really absolutely gorgeous start. Before any chase theme, this map is lush and colorful. Almost every sort of map in this game is really just very dull and visually alike, with its lack of color diversity in any sort of way. X's castle, while it does give people full color, has a very dreary atmosphere. Not Perfect is so intentionally garish and otherworldly due to it being a secret stage, so I wouldn't really count either of these stages. This feels like a proper look at the world of Sonic, and honestly, its outcome memory is at its most visually distinct and impressive. And once the first chase starts, the map loses that strong sense of uniqueness that it had with a violent flash on the screen. It's really disappointing. Now, I get why it does this, but I just wish it didn't do it in the way it did it. I want a visually distinct, colorful map that feels properly like the world of Sonic, and the closest we have is not perfect. I want to actually feel like I'm playing in a Sonic environment, and I think there's a lot better ways to gas up the executioners. It'd be significantly more interesting if the weather got progressively worse as each death on the survivor side occurred, with Last Man Standing being the map at its most dreary. That's far more interesting than just instantly killing the unique identity the map could have had, and it also adds unique storytelling elements to each and every match played on the map. Really, I just want to see more from this game's art direction. While I love the models and the maps are very well built visually, I feel like there's just a heavy color filter over everything and just a ton of filters that hold the game's visuals back in a way. I don't know. I like when things have color to them, I like when they stand out, and I like when it doesn't blend together to me. I'm tired of every environment having this really strong one color, you know what I mean? I do not like the blur present on the majority of maps, and the depth of field is just unbearable at this point. There's a reason that in every non-Roblox game, people turn off depth of field when they can, because it really just does diminish the experience for a lot of people, and it doesn't look that good in the overwhelming amount of situations. I don't like feeling like I'm not playing without my glasses, and I'd wish they just remove the blurry filters and stop with that already. I want to see more of the map in detail. Anyways, none of these maps really feel that good to play on, but as I've played them more, they've become a little more tolerable, and I'm pretty sure they have talked about changing them at some point. None of the maps unfortunately feel that good to play on, at least at the moment. They're all absurdly large too, which I hope we don't get too many more larger maps in the future. Angel Island is definitely a lot more bearable as a survivor in my opinion, unless you're against Tripwire, and Mystic Cave would be a lot better if it just had maybe a few more paths to account for Tripwire and less invisible walls. Green Hill I think is close to being really cool, but just needs a few more tweaks like the rest of the maps to bring out the best in it, and I really do like the idea I proposed of the weather being progressive and match sensitive over just being gray immediately. The last thing I'd like to talk about in the gameplay stuff is the gameplay loop of Outcome Memories itself. The more I play this game, the less I start to enjoy it. I think when Outcome Memories first came out, it was a very novel concept, the disaster-style format, but with absolutely incredible visuals and generally feeling a lot more high quality. But when you actually load into a match, there's nothing to really do as a survivor other than wait. Playing in a full lobby of 8 makes matches take roughly around 8 to 10 minutes. That much time devoted to really doing nothing but running out the clock. All there is for survivors to do is engage with the killer in this game, and that's what's rough about this game, is because doing so is really just inadvisable. This isn't really a game where conventional looping is possible, it's way more about juking and using abilities. Your only methods of surviving are successfully using an ability, your teammate successfully using an ability to protect you, or juking a killer in very specific spots to create distance. Engagement with the killer is the most fun part of an asymmetrical horror game, and the dynamics between the two roles really does matter. A character like Colossus, who was designed in such a way for survivors to avoid as much as possible, can be really frustrating in a game when there's nothing to do but engage with the killer or hide. And hiding doesn't exactly work against Colossus. Dying off one interaction can be rough, and there's a reason that people don't like playing against him. Because the one time the game gets exciting, they're already downed or dead. A character like Tripwire sucks to go against when all she needs to do is have line of sight on you and suddenly you're bleeding HP, and despite being a zoner, she's ridiculously strong up close as well. Why would you ever want to do anything other than hide against her? I can't say I absolutely know what's best for this game, and at this point, I'm unsure what this game can really do that isn't some pretty big overhauls or additions to the gameplay or characters, which I'm sure they already plan on doing anyways. There's so many different aspects of this update that I really just disagree with the design of, and I predicted many different things might be poorly received, and I was unfortunately right about a lot of these things. The shop and menu changes didn't seem to address a lot of my actual issues with it. The maps, while well built and visually cool without the filters on them, are burdened with a bunch of gameplay issues, while not being the most visually exciting because of those filters. I seriously can't stress how much I wish this game just had more color to it, and how much I think that would do for me personally. Tripwire as an archetype of killer I think is just really risky to put into any ASIM game, but especially one like Outcome Memories, and I can't say she really feels ready for release in her current state either. She's capable of being played in a very cruel and scummy way thanks to her trap, and I think some of her abilities are fundamentally too strong, like her laser and glide. I think it's unreasonable to expect every issue in this game to be addressed in this update. I certainly wasn't expecting it to. But I know some people were, and I think that's just a little unfair and unreasonable to the game and its developers. Because despite all my criticisms, I am enjoying playing this game again, at least when I'm not going against a very specifically sweaty Tripwire player. I still think Survivor is a very unique experience, even more so now that the game's lethality has gone up, and I really do enjoy playing as Colossus, especially now that he's been toned down a little bit. Let me actually talk with you about the way this game has been handled, because I'm extremely mixed on it. Believe it or not, as a grown adult who plays Roblox games for my YouTube channel, I'm not a very online person, and I don't play that much Roblox. I have things to do in real life, and when I'm not doing these things, I'm usually playing Steam games over Roblox games. So I may not be the most informed person on a lot of specific incidents or examples on the things I'm going to be talking about, but I'm very confident in my ability to communicate with others, and I'd like to believe I have a pretty solid understanding of how things like communities or fandoms work. The developers are a bunch of teenagers to college-age students, so I can't blame them for not being the most professional, nor can I blame them for the monumental pressure they were put under from the thousands of eyes on them. If 100,000 people play an update and 10,000 people don't like it, it's a lot easier to fixate on those voices than the positive ones, especially after all the hard work they've put into and no doubt having crunched themselves to release this update. Still, criticism is really important. I mostly just want to talk about the developer relationship with the community, starting with and mostly just focusing on transparency. Transparency is something that a lot of people consider a good thing with development teams. However, when improperly handled, transparency can really only just make things worse. Much of the content uploaded by major team members and testers alike had both shown far too much and had far too many unintended implications. Communication is a delicate thing. It's not as simple as exchanging words or saying something outright. To think that is actually really short-sighted. Communication is the connection between two or more people and their emotions. Everything we do carries implications. So when one of your team members is uploading official guides or several videos of largely unedited footage of unreleased characters, people expect those characters to release pretty soon. You can say the update isn't close all you want, but that doesn't matter, unfortunately. That's not the impression that you're giving to people. That's not the levels of excitement that you're building. When you have testers for the game doing entire live streams as characters several major updates away, when you have YouTubers gaining access to unreleased content for whatever reason, what are people reasonably supposed to think? It's also kind of funny this game has had this reputation. I've been asked by several other people in the community if I've ever gained access to these characters or a tester panel of some kind, and I don't. I never have. There's a reason this community has become so ravenous. Unintentionally or not, a carrot has been constantly dangled in front of their faces for so long. There's a reason that most ASIM games show very little to nothing at all of an upcoming character until that update is right around the corner, or they let people publicly test these things for them and then fix them for major releases. The former keeps expectations low. There's a big difference in implications that I've talked about, from a cropped piece of footage that barely shows anything to several YouTubers making full videos in them in extensive detail. The latter, at the very least, gets around the bad parts of showing so much by letting people actually experience it themselves and give their feedback. They get to experience the progress firsthand. This is the first game in a while that I've seen that shows so much while not letting their average fan actually give it a try and serve as a playtester for free. Obviously, people were asking for version 0.2 to have public testing because they're excited for it. Duh. It's a player base that's excited for new content, and their first major content update. But guess what? Public tests help design the game, they help balance the game, and they make the communities happier. They're a good thing to do in most cases. I get why version 0.2 didn't have one this time around, but if they're going to continue with chapter updates, which I really think they shouldn't, they should definitely consider doing public testing sessions. It's hard for me to say whether or not version 0.1 was truly ready for release. Based on all the things I've read, I think the reason it was released now was largely due to fan pressure. I don't blame the developers for that. I've said time and time again, but nobody wants an update released more than the actual people writing the code, designing the maps, and actually developing the project. There's a lot more guidance I could provide when it comes to fan interaction and engaging with your community, but at that point, it's really only whether or not they would want to hear it. I don't exactly want to be labeled as someone who feels like they're superior or knows more, or someone who is bashing or not giving proper criticism. All I'm saying is there definitely is a way forward on how you can prevent these levels of pressure from bubbling up this high again. Now, they've said that going into version 0.3 and its future, they're going to be a lot more quiet about these updates. And while I appreciate that, everyone on the team needs to be on the same page about that. Testers, developers, and every other role on the team. If you still have people extensively showing unfinished content or stuff that's in testing, then it's not going to change anything. It'll just be a repeat of everything that came before it. If you want to actually show off that stuff, then it needs to be something that people can really get their hands on. Don't Blink is a great example of that. I absolutely loved the reveal of Don't Blink, and it was released during a time when the community really needed something they could actually experience, you know what I mean? It was a very well-placed and strategic reveal, and I don't mean that in like a manipulative way, I mean it was just really good timing. It helped people a lot with community happiness, and provided content that people could fully enjoy and experience. It also helps that Don't Blink really just cemented to me that yeah, this is a passion project. The release of version 0.2 is a major pressure release and a nice reset for the next update. With what the team has learned, Hopefully they can navigate through the next update with better community management. And if you want me to be fully honest, I think a really good way to keep the pressure low would be to just stop doing chapter updates. They should not be pushing themselves to the standard of other games that have significantly more resources than they do, and a lot of those games still struggle even with those resources. Major releases are cool, don't get me wrong, but after version 0.2 and the mixed reception to it and the very shaky launch, I think it'd be a lot better for this team to just take things slower once they return from their break. It's okay to drop Shadow by himself, it's okay to drop Lord X by himself. Sally could absolutely drop by herself. It's okay to just say, hey, we finished a new map, check it out. It's even okay to just say, hey, this map is a work in progress, come play the game and see it. It doesn't need to be content either. You can push an update that overhauls the shop, adds an ability to rebind specific survivor abilities to different keys, makes selecting characters a lot more streamlined and easier, and so many other things. Managing a community isn't easy, but there's a lot of things that you can do on both the development side as well as the social side to mitigate the levels of insanity that things reached, really. I'd love to say more on the subject, but that's really only for personal conversations, and I'm not comfortable making a video about this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? So let's be honest here. Did I enjoy this update? I definitely enjoyed it more than I disliked it, but I'm truthfully a little mixed on a lot of things. I was hoping that this game would fix a lot of my issues with the game, much of which I had assigned to 2011X, but it really didn't. It also did come with its own new issues. I have my issues with the maps that I've made known at this point, and the new executioners come with their own baggage. Colossus feels like a character who needs very few changes at the moment, and he feels pretty fine, honestly. But Tripwire outright feels far too strong through multiple different facets of her kit. I want this game to be good, I like this game, and I want these developers to find success. It's hard for me to firmly criticize them knowing in good faith how brutal some people can be towards them, but I also can't blame people for being emotional after all this time either. It puts me in a pretty tricky spot where I'd like to be a lot more sharp with my criticism, staying constructive and kind of course, but I would hate for my words to negatively impact the mood of the developers or add on to the lashing that people give them, because I really do admire them and their commitment to this game. For just a last few closing comments on what I think can be done fairly quickly to make the game better without proposing these massive balance changes or huge changes to Tripwire or anything like that, I really would just prefer if this game would stop doing chapter updates when they come back from their break. It's okay to have individual content releases, and I'd be especially pleased with updates that drop one new survivor or just one new map by itself and that's it. It's okay to do that, and I think this game could do that more going forward. Chapter releases can end up gating a lot of other changes behind it too, like menu changes, quality of life, and other things. I know Outcome Memories has a recode planned just to improve their framework and such or something like that, and I think once that happens, it'd be especially good to just have these smaller content updates that could expand the roster of characters and maps, and then maybe they could return to chapter updates if they wanted to. The ranking system in its current state is really unforgiving in a not good way. Now that we have characters that need to be purchased with rings, I can't think of any good reason that people should be earning 15 rings per round if they end up dying or getting an F rank or something. Tripwire is the cheapest executioner at 1998 rings. 15 rings doesn't even dent that. Meanwhile, if you S ranks, you'll get her in roughly 5 matches. This is a really extreme difference, right? Either lower ranks need to be less punishing on the ring counters, or just remove the death multiplier. Outcome Memories seems like a game where death is meant to be a lot more expected than version 0.1 made a lot of players believe it should be. And as such, I don't think death should really be that harsh of a penalty, if one at all. Especially if you end up playing a character like Cream, where you're going to get killed. Especially in the case of characters like Sonic, Metal Sonic, and Knuckles, who you can argue should be risking death even more. I just think that people should be earning more rings at this point, and the ranking system really just shouldn't be as punishing as it is. I'm sorry if I came across as too harsh on certain elements of this update, but again, just know that I love this game and I want the best for it, and those criticisms stem from that care. I tried my best to articulate my first impressions in a fair and reasonable manner, but I didn't want to suppress my emotions and come across as fake either. If you like this video, like, subscribe, blah blah. I'll do a revisit on 0.2 at some point, or whenever Fleetway drops, maybe. We'll just have to see. Take care of yourself, alright?